Final Fantasy VII Rebirth was an incredible game and is likely my game of the year. I really can't think of too many things that are topping it. However, we're now looking forward to the third part of the Final Fantasy VII Re-Trilogy, which is going to be the conclusion of the series, and that is really exciting. And today we have a brand new interview with Naoki Hamaguchi, who is the director of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and is also going to be the director of Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3. And this interview comes to us via CG World and it's been translated to us by Genki at Genki JPN, and he had something interesting to say about the use of the engine for Part 3 and whether or not they want to switch to Unreal Engine 5. Here is what Genki translated that Hamaguchi said in the interview. Quote, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth director Naoki Hamaguchi said Rebirth took 4 years to develop in parallel with Final Fantasy VII Remake Integrate. He says they are considering using Unreal Engine 5 for the final game, but believes what players want the most is for them to deliver the game in good shape as soon as possible. He says he'll make a decision based on whether it'll be faster to switch engines or whether it is best to make it all at once as it is now. Now, I already know what most of you are probably going to say. You would love to see this in Unreal Engine 5. You want to see it in the best graphical fidelity possible, as well as all of the new feature sets that Unreal Engine 5 will offer being implemented in the Part 3. Wouldn't everyone want to see Final Fantasy VII Re-Trilogy go out with the biggest bang possible? And that much I definitely agree with. I want Part 3 to look and perform as best as it possibly can. Now, when we look at Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, it is a very beautiful game. However, there are definitely rough points to it. The performance mode is not quite as good as it could be. It is incredibly blurry to look at, and they have launched several patches trying to address the blurriness in performance mode, and unfortunately, it just really has not gotten there. The game currently still looks rather blurry in the performance mode. However, if you switch over to the graphics mode, which unfortunately is 30 frames per second, the game looks pristine. It looks incredible, it looks solid. However, you're definitely sacrificing the frame rate in order to get that pristine image. And it's just unfortunate too, because the performance mode, again, of course you expect a performance mode to not be crystal clear. Of course, there has to be a drop in resolution internally in order to get the targeted 60 frames per second. That is literally how performance mode works. That and turning down other graphical features within the engine. That's all to be expected. It's just, man, it is one of the most blurry performance modes that I've seen of recent games running on the PS5. And so it's just unfortunate because we all wish that the image could be more crisp. And eventually it will. PS5 Pro is rumored to be coming. I'm sure that if they launch like a PS5 Pro patch for this game, it would definitely address those issues. Not to mention that eventually this game will likely come to PC. Final Fantasy XVI is currently on its way to PC. And I mean, once the game is on PC, you won't really have to choose between resolution and frame rate. If you have a modern graphics card, you will be able to have both. However, people are wanting Unreal Engine 5 because they're thinking we're going to be flying the high wind around this massive open world in the next game. And that is really exciting. It's probably going to be the greatest sense of exploration that we've had from a Final Fantasy game, maybe ever, especially in the modern era. Being able to fly around a fully realized FF7 world map, dude, that's going to be insane. That's going to be incredible. And so people want that in the best fidelity that it can be. Now, here is the problem. Even though going from Unreal Engine 4 to Unreal Engine 5 is relatively smooth compared to going from any other two engines in between, it still poses some hurdles that the development team will deal with. From talking to a few developers and looking into it myself, the transition could probably take a few months. It's just really multifactorial. There are so many different components going on. The fact that the developers here have their own custom fork of Unreal Engine 4, as well as their own tool sets that they've made for it. And unfortunately, all of this could cost them time. And of course, time is money on any production, and it would just be, a very big question. As Hamaguchi says, it really all comes down to, and that is, would switching to Unreal Engine 5 save them more time due to the new features that it offers, or would it end up costing them more time to switch the engines? I think the most important thing for Part 3 is for it to come out on time and on budget. I mean, look, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth was one of the best games that came out this year. And even despite that, it still seems to be struggling to perform in terms of sales. It's just really unfortunate because I actually think that Square knocked it out of the park with this one. It's one of those games that's not really selling as well, partially to do with the fact that it's a remake sequel. You know, it's not as accessible as a game that you can just go pick up and play. And then the other aspect of it is, of course, that it is PS5 exclusive and it is locked to that platform only. So if they spend the money to move this game, this project from Unreal Engine 4 to Unreal Engine 5, is that actually going to move the needle on sales? Or is it just going to make the development side of things cost even more money? Because again, they would have to, at the very least, bare minimum, spend a couple of months transitioning the engine from Unreal Engine 4 to Unreal Engine 5. And my thoughts on that are, is that just going to make this cost more money and then ultimately not really bring in much more profit? I mean, is Unreal Engine 5 really going to move the needle, be the delta for it to justify the cost, especially when they already have an existing pipeline of things working? In particular, when, you know, by the time the next game launches, we can only assume that the next game is going to be running on a PS5 Pro. There will be PS5 Pros out there that you can go and buy. And if you really need the game to look as pristine as possible, that'll be an option. It's also possible that maybe this third game will not just be locked to PlayStation 5 from day one, since Square Enix has commented that they don't really want to move forward on continuing to have PlayStation 5 exclusives. Maybe they can bring this to PC day one instead. Of course, this is why I am a PC gamer primarily. I don't want to have to choose between two things like frame rate and resolution. I want both of those things at the same time. And so it's going to be a tough decision. But again, I agree with Hamaguchi. The most important thing is to deliver the game in good shape and for it to be on time. And I think that if the fidelity of the third part is on par with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, then I don't think it will be a tremendously huge deal. What I would prefer though is that, you know, if it were possible somehow to, you know, fix the game's performance mode and, you know, the third part looked like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, I would be okay with it. I know everyone else says no. For everyone saying no, I mean, that's what a PC is for. That is what the PC version is going to do. It's just unfortunate. Consoles are kind of, you know, they are what they are. If you're picky about graphics, if you're picky about performance, you're always going to have these types of releases where, you know, things are not quite as optimal as they can be. And on PC, you know, you're never going to have make that choice necessarily in the same way. And again, when you really consider, you know, the sales situation and performing to sales expectations, the more time that you spend working on these games, the more time you spend investing money into switching the engine and stuff like that, the sales expectation rises. And a lot of people think that Square just pulls a random number out of a box and says, oh, this is what we arbitrarily decided that the game needs to sell. That is not how sales expectations work. These are calculated based on how much they spend on the game and what the expectations for profit is. And whenever you spend more time, you know, working on stuff like this, ultimately the sales expectations increase because you're spending more budget on developing the game. And I really think that if you want to give Part 3 a fighting chance of being successful, then I think kind of the best thing that you can do for Part 3 is to put it out as fast as possible. Whether they switch to Unreal Engine 5 or not, ultimately for me, comes down to whether or not budget-wise, time-wise, it is going to be faster for them to be able to get the game out when compared to Unreal Engine 4 and their existing pipeline and their existing tools that they've already built on it. Because again, they're not running vanilla Unreal Engine 4. If they were running vanilla Unreal Engine 4, completely unmodified, I mean, yeah, I would probably say go ahead and upgrade to Unreal Engine 5 today. It wouldn't really be a huge deal. But since they're using a custom version of Unreal Engine 4 and they already have custom tool sets built on it, and that is what allowed them to make Final Fantasy VII Rebirth so fast, then I don't know if sacrificing that is necessarily worth it. But these are just my thoughts on this, and I'd love to hear yours in the comments below. If I'm not mistaken, this is the first video that I've uploaded since we've hit 100K. So thank you guys so much for that. And I'll see you all in the next video. Later, guys.